friends. Welcome to Season 5, Episode 190 of School Librarians United. I'm your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian, starting my 16th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. Before we dive into today's topic, I wanted to share something with you that's been on my mind. I don't need to remind school librarians about the incredibly hateful, systematic, and targeted campaigns being waged against public and school librarians by well-funded organizations as well as politicians and legislatures around the United States. I feel particularly guilty when I post an episode which doesn't address book bannings and the defamation of courageous librarians who defend student access to our collections. I did want to point out the 9 previously posted episodes for which I'm incredibly grateful to those guests who have shared their expertise and resources. Friends, I have included these in the advocacy playlist, a link which can be found in our show notes, SLU playlist, and I'll list them for you right now. Episode 35, Self-Advocacy, We Are the Resource. Episode 43, Advocacy at the State and District Level. Episode 76, Good Trouble and Advocacy. Episode 106, Pro-Advocacy and You. Episode 114, Fighting for School Libraries. Episode 132, Raising the Profile of Libraries and Librarians. Episode 162, Fighting Censorship. Episode 164, Family Outreach. And Episode 170, RESPECT. Furthermore, I would like to take this opportunity to invite guests who would like to address this current assault on libraries and librarians to record an episode in the future. I'd like to extend a very special welcome this week to listeners Jacqueline in Japan, Tamara in South Carolina, Aubrey and Nikki in Texas. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Facebook, on Twitter, my handle is @LMS_United, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now a word from our official sponsor, Capstone. Capstone is an innovative publisher and education technology provider of children's content for school libraries, classrooms, and at-home learning. Home of the award-winning Pebble Go research database, Capstone has a passion for creating inspired learning and intellectual curiosity in children, and I'm so excited to be working with them. And now in a segment I like to call Why I Love Capstone. Friends, I want to talk to you today about a series of books which I would definitely be adding to an elementary collection, and I'll tell you why. I don't need to go into your space to know right away that the largest collection of nonfiction books in your library right now, if you're elementary, is your animal section. And that's for good reason. This 6-book series, which was published in 2022, is titled Look-alike Animals. And it is directed towards your lower elementary grades K through 3. And the books are approximately 32 pages each. And these are fantastic. And I love using these in an instructional lesson that I do with my students. And I know that my students love checking these out because it is a way that students can invite adults to learn something with them. And I'll give a couple examples. First of all, those 6 books are, Is it a butterfly or a moth? Is it a dolphin or a porpoise? Is it a frog or a toad? Is it a honeybee or a wasp? Is it a turtle or a tortoise? And finally, is it an alligator or a crocodile? Now, friends, when I do these in a lesson, it's a great way to introduce the use of like a Venn diagram, and you could do that as a demonstration on a smartboard with your students. The fun thing is that so many times when our littles learn about something, they want to share it with the adults in their lives. And the really fun thing is, I'm going to tell you right now, I do not know the difference between many of these animals, and it would give a very authentic opportunity for students to demonstrate what they learned in a book that they checked out of their library. I am so grateful to Capstone for their continued support of the podcast and their generous offer to all listeners of School Librarians United a very special discount. Visit shop.capstonepub.com and use the code UNITED to get $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and Capstone interactive ebooks. That's code UNITED for $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and ebooks on shop.capstonepub.com. And now for our episode, Independent School Librarian, and my conversation with Melissa Pillot. Friends, I'm so excited. Melissa Pillot, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
I am so excited. Melissa, thank you for joining us today because we have never touched upon the idea of an independent school librarian. So we are really excited to dive into this today. Before we get started, please tell us where in the country you work. Give us an idea about your current library. What is your teaching schedule and what kind of grades you support?
Awesome. So I am at an independent school in St. Louis, Missouri, and that is another word for private school. Let's just be right out there about it. I actually teach 10 grades, to be completely honest, from age 2 to age 12. So I go from an early twos program to 6th grade. So we go all the way through, and then most of these students start 7th grade at another secondary school. The really cool thing about where I work, I'm actually in the city of St. Louis, by a block, across the street. Someone could throw a stone into Forest Park. It's just absolutely gorgeous. It is our central park. It is as large and as beautiful and full of free museums and zoo and all of these great resources we have literally in our backyard. We are quite literally housed in 6 different homes. These used to be people's houses. And so the school started, of course, in one house as someone opened an independent preschool. And it just sort of grew and grew and grew. And that happened in 1960, which is not insignificant. And that might come up later in the podcast. So now it is taking up 6 houses. So my library is a living room and dining room, a corridor, and where I am sitting right now used to be the garage. I'm sitting in what used to be the garage of this old house. So it's a very neat, it just has such a good feeling, good energy in it. I've got these wrought iron gates at the entrance to the reading room, and wrapped them in ivy and just did some really neat things to make it just feel like a home, make it feel like you're at home. So that is really kind of a fun thing. And then my schedule, it's in flux, as are so many things following COVID. We had a 6-day rotation, which I would see every single class in the 6-day rotation and have one day, the equivalent of one day, sort of as a work day. Our classes are smaller. We have in a group, it would be between 12 and 15 kids come to me at a time. So it's really, really awesome, except for that means it's 10 grades and 3 or 4 sections per grade. So when you get down to the math of that, it does not quite fit in a 6-day schedule anymore. So we are going into a 4-day schedule, of which I get 2 4-day schedules to spread that out. So it is its own dynamic. I don't have an assistant. I have a few volunteers, but for the most part, it is just me from age 2 to age 12, from purchasing, cataloging, processing, and all of the other things that go along with us being school librarians, which sometimes means doing some random other projects and lots of collaboration.
Yes, other duties as assigned. I'm really fascinated because in all the years that I have been interviewing school librarians, and I've interviewed school librarians around the country, around the world, and more than 100 of them, no one has ever been teaching in a former residence. I think this is fantastic because how many times have I talked to people who have said, I just want to make my place cozy. It looks too institutional. My space looks too institutional. It looks just very stark. And I've heard words like this. And it's like, so many of us have tried to channel our energies and money into making our spaces cozy, home-like. I want my kids to feel at home. And you are literally in a home.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think the flip side of that is the challenge of when you walk into my space, it's not huge. It is, the collection is compact, and there's a lot that I do to really maximize the shelving and the face out display and making things highly browsable in a unique environment that was not designed for industrial furniture, was not designed for having flexible seating arrangements and things like that. So my very first year here, I would have a day where I'd see 4 kindergarten classes, 4 fourth grade classes, and then fit a preschool in the middle. And I was literally like flipping up tables and moving things around for each of those classes. And I have usurped an old computer lab to be able to have a little bit more flexibility and to be able to have some things still be highly flexible, but catered to the learning needs, not the physical needs. So that's been kind of an exciting adaptation. There's lots of adaptations we have to basically being in 100-year-old homes. These homes were built in between 1924 and 1927, I believe. So
yes, the word we use is vintage. Yes, vintage homes, and as opposed to old. Vintage homes. I have so many other questions I want to ask, and we're going to definitely dive into this. But before we do, you're an independent school librarian. I'd like to talk a little bit about an amazing accolade that you have received this year. I've never interviewed anyone who's received this to date. ALA's I Love My Librarian Award. Now, I know listeners would love to know what caught the eye of those who nominated you, because this is an award which you get nominated for. You cannot self-nominate.
Correct. I think that full disclosure place of things is that as an independent only librarian in your building, there is a little bit of like, hey, we applied for this collaboration grant. We did a lot of work for it and we didn't get picked. Do you want to turn this collaboration grant application into this other option? Would that be something that you would be interested in? And so I got a resounding yes from that. That was our 6th grade math teacher. Also at the time taught sustainability to our 6th grade teachers. And we had done this great sustainability program, and she had won something locally in the year before. And I was like, and had been nominated by coworkers as well, so in that space of looking at what we had done and a way to make the work we had done be highlighted and really to look at it as a place of like, schools can do this. Schools should be doing this. And if you think your librarian is not the place to be talking about sustainability or the environment, I think we all do try to do so many things in so many different interest areas, because that's the thing, is that we can. It's completely adaptable to everything. So long story short, yes, Susan Zara, wonderful math teacher and sustainability teacher, agreed to put that together. And that was just a wonderful way to take and I talked to the students about this. What we did is we took something that was highly disappointing. Maybe not highly, but it was disappointing. When you apply for a grant, it is so much work, and you're asking so much of your stakeholders, to get parents and teachers and an administrator to come together and take their time to support your grant proposal. So that's how that really came about. And to make it even the icing on the cake is that if people I hope that people are interested in applying for this, because it doesn't ask for all of those things. It doesn't ask for you to prove your worth. It just asks for people to look at what librarians do and see the importance and see the value, and to elevate that across all of our fields, all of the different areas of librarianship. The application process was, as from following along, really simple. I mean, I just would really recommend to put yourself out there. So many people, as I mentioned in my acceptance speech, so many people are doing things like this. So many people are facing even greater challenges, and to be able to represent that as a librarian felt very good, but also by no means is this the end all be all of what we can and will do.
Forgive me, but as a staff member in a private school, you are wholly dependent on enrollment, on tuition being paid. By raising the profile of what you do, you are in turn shining a light on all the good that your school does. And then that can be turned around into bringing in more families because they see that this school has award-winning programs and award-winning faculty. And so there's this effort is not wasted. It's not lost. It's not vanity. There are tuition dollars that can be attributed to the awards that raise the profile of your school because you're there. Can I ask for clarification? Are you a parochial school or are you, so non-denominational?
Completely independent, exactly. There's a large organization called the National Association of Independent Schools. It's sort of a large overarching organization that many different types of independent schools can be a part of. So parochial schools, just academic schools, learning disability schools, those can all fall under this. Basically, any private school that doesn't fall under your state's accreditation category for public schools could fall under a independent school accreditation umbrella.
Cool. Awesome. But I'm learning as we go, friends. You know, I think it's especially timely that we're having this conversation in August. The deadline for the I Love My Librarian is coming up. It's September 30th of 2022. So friends, if you're listening in the future, I apologize. This is somewhat dated information, but you know, I've included links in the show notes, not only to your acceptance speech. I think that's fantastic that it was televised. I feel like we've already met, but also the FAQs and the criteria. I think it's really important for us to share with listeners right now. Could you give listeners an idea of who is eligible to be considered for the I Love My Librarian accolade each year?
Thank you. It's like I said, it's actually quite simple. You have to be a current ALA member. You must have been working within that previous year, and you need to have a master's degree in library science from an accredited program. And so even that criteria, it does eliminate some school librarians from the considerations. If you're in a situation where you are and maybe they look at that in more depth than I do. On the application side of it, I know that my situation is that I have a master's degree. I don't have a teaching certificate. So that's an area where, for me, this was a positive. It was one of the things that I could qualify for when some other awards seem really, really tied into the school, state school district type of parameters. So the application is really just an essay. It's just a blank Google form type essay. And I will tell people that what I found fascinating, and I did not know until the award ceremony part of things, you know, we recorded our own videos and sent them in, and their tech team spliced them all together. And to be introduced by all of the past presidents, current presidents, and division presidents. I mean, I know, and it was it was on YouTube and 300 people watched it, and most of it was all of our families. That did something for me. That really switched it from the moment of, this is just a fluke. I don't know. I must have checked their environmental box. This is great. I'm excited to know that those were the people reading through all of the applications. It was humbling. It was, but it was also, that pride in our organization and pride in the work that librarians do in so many different facets of life. But yeah, it felt like these are some pretty big names that saw my application and saw value, or my nomination, and saw value in it. That was very legitimizing. Absolutely. So.
And I don't think I think everybody can identify with a little imposter syndrome anytime we sort of put ourselves out there. We promote ourselves. We are a humble bunch, but we need to get accustomed to being proud and loud about what we do, because we are trying to make sure that we preserve this, the idea that what we do is valued and vital to our students' learning. I think it's important, worth mentioning, that there are only 10 recipients. They're up to 10 recipients because there is a cash award. In Movers and Shakers, I was in a class of 41, 6 of whom were school librarians, and then it was distributed across other different types of areas of librarianship. But in this case, I think there were 3 school librarians out of 10. And it really was fantastic to learn about. So the applications are due in the end of September, but you found out in November? That's a quick turnaround. That's huge.
Well, what's interesting about the program also is that it says winners will be announced in January. And I don't know how your experience was with your call about Movers and Shakers is you've won this award and you have to be quiet about it for X amount of time. I don't know how long your keep quiet time was, but mine was almost 2 months. And that was really, and I think part of that was just trying to get material from people before they leave for, us, it was winter break, and then put the material together. And maybe people go on holiday for their organization. ALA is the one who did all of the tech component of it. And so I'll kind of double back to, there is a cash prize, absolutely, and there is a personal cash prize and a prize for your school. And so that is really phenomenal. And for everyone who said, don't you dare spend that money on school supplies, full well knowing that I spend at least a fifth of that every year on the books that come out between, February and April, and my budget is gone. So it was really kind of, it was both personally validating, but also to see the school get a stipend for a programming or something that I could do with students that was sort of maybe outside. And it really pushed myself to try something new. I'll tell you about that in a moment. But the local newspaper covered it. And of course, that was sort of the first big thing was great award and cash prize. So some of the older students were like, wow. And then we had a discussion about taxes, and we had some other little minor sorts of things. But there's a $5,000 cash prize and $750 for your school. And that is not a small amount of money at all. I did have the 6th graders. There was a portion of the application or the nomination that 6th graders had submitted quotes for. And so that when they were 5th graders, they had submitted these quotes. And so as 6th graders, I had them help me decide what we would do with that. And that was really fun too.
Love the that you build in that little, student voice into this prize that you were able to receive on behalf of the program that you've built at your school. Friends, I encourage you to watch Melissa's acceptance speech, which is linked in our show notes. Melissa, you use this opportunity to truly showcase the extraordinary challenges that school librarians face. And I watched a couple other acceptance speeches. It was a lot of, I want to thank this, and I want to thank this person, I want to thank this person. But you really did use this as your own little personal soapbox.
Wow. You got me. If not now, when? If not that point in time, what am I doing? I am doing this work for my students, 100%. There is that space of they are who I work for. And given a national platform and an opportunity to say what is important and what students need, that was how could I not? How could I not? So yeah, there was if you are in librarianship, you absolutely know which elements of things were happening already in December of 2021 or well before December of 2021 to get a sense of what challenges we're facing in education and what challenges we're facing as school librarians and just as human beings on this planet right now. So that space of mentioning children needing to see themselves and their lives reflected in literature is without a doubt something I've been saying for my 20 years librarian career. And it's not a soundbite. That is what I've seen firsthand. And I just, it's what we do. And I also had mentioned, our local organizations. I remember the Missouri Association of School Librarians. That was one of their theme one year was like, it's just what we do. And it's what you do. So.
Well, and it reminded me a little bit of like when the valedictorian used their opportunity at their speech in the graduation to go totally political. And it was like glorious because nobody can shut them up. And I loved that. I mean, it was like, oh, go, go, go. And I was like, oh, wait, she's thanking people for winning this, recognition. And yet using this moment rather than shining the light on you to shine the light on the profession. And so it was like, oh, I was getting very emotional. I was just really encouraged. You made sure to give a special shout out to your state organization, which is MASL, the Missouri Association of School Librarians. And is it pronounced AISL?
Do you know? That's a great question. I don't know. I like to spell things out, so I always try to say AISL.
It's AISL, Association of Independent School Librarians. Would you let listeners know how your membership in these organizations has supported your journey as an independent school librarian? Because this has been, you said 20 years.
Well, and yeah, actually, so as a public librarian, before I ventured into the school category, I was a children's librarian. I was a YA librarian. I've kind of done it all, and I love it. I do. My heart has a great fondness for YA, not just literature, but YA librarianship. I just think that it's an incredible, powerful area and a great service to kids. And so long story short, public library, 2 kids, school library. And so that was sort of part of my journey. And so that's where I really foundationally started at Central Library in downtown St. Louis, like your gorgeous, beautiful, smack dab in the middle of the downtown city area, seeing every age, every walk of life, and just really embedded in a sense of the role of this library as a civic institution. So I don't remember how I got there, but back to the organizations. So I have been a member of ALA since just before I got my master's degree. And I've kept it current even when I was not working outside the home. I still did some consulting and some workshops and things like that as my kids were growing up. And then the venture into independent schools came from the recommendation from another friend who had gone from public library into independent school. And the neat catch there is, if people are interested in this or looking at a career change along these lines, my master's does not have the school library certification on top of it. But an independent school does not have to have the certification. They do have very stringent qualification markers, for which at my school, I think myself and the school counselor are the only people that have to have a master's degree. So there's still a high degree of acknowledgement of your role and your expertise, but it didn't require those extra courses to finish out or to go back 10 years later and find that all of the classes have changed and you have to basically have a whole new degree. So I would put it out there as a recommendation to search or keep that in your mind as an option. It's something that the master's is highly valued, but it's not the only way to get into the field. And so then, so that's how I got into the school situation. And then it was actually a few years. I was here for 2 years before I had heard of the Association of Independent School Librarians. And one of our local schools was doing a summer institute on this was 3 or 4 years ago, on diversity audits. And it was a great opportunity to do in-town professional development, meet with other independent school librarians in my town and also from across the country, coming in for this, what felt like a pretty low cost and high yield professional development. Just an opportunity to dig deep, not a 2 hour or a 1 hour that you leave feeling completely overwhelmed, but a 2-day workshop that allowed people to exercise those skills, ask questions, and connect. So that was my introduction to Association of Independent School Librarians, and they have this like ancient thing. Oh my gosh, it's a listserv. Amy, I mean, do you remember listservs? It can be absolutely amazing, and it can be kind of, my email gets crazy. So I have separate tabs in my email, and all the listserv stuff goes into one tab. But even that alone is giving me questions I haven't considered, introducing me to resources that I didn't know I needed yet, but now that person's asking about it, I know really what's going on in the field. And from the beginning of COVID, when independent school teachers in California were in the beginning of March talking about what was happening with their schools, I felt very aware, very prepared, and that I already had a built-in community to sort of cycle through what can we do, what's happening next, what should we expect, and how can we support each other. So there was a wonderful librarian. Her name is Claire Hazard. I will put her Twitter handle in your show notes at the end. And there are lots of David Wee. There are just a number of people through AISL that hosted monthly or weekly. I mean, it just seemed like wherever you turned around, there was a Zoom meeting that was, hey, we're talking about curbside pickup, or we're talking about what is your school allowing you to do? Because across the country, where there were so many different permissions, your library's been turned into a classroom for 4 different grades. How can we support you? How does that look? And moving on from there. So that was some incredible professional development, but also really community building and understanding that you're not alone. And when you're the one librarian for 10 ages and everything's gone digital, feeling not alone was really great. The The Missouri Association of School Librarians kept things going strong. They converted their spring conference to virtual right away. And that was the one, I think that I first saw Casey Boyd. I had been following her on Twitter, and she was the keynote speaker. And it was very important for me to make sure that I registered for that conference and to be able to hear her speak, to support each other in this time where that's a really important person to hear from. And also, I want to represent Missouri well. In addition to the conference, they did online book clubs and also sponsored a GLSEN professional development on getting LGBTQ books in to school libraries. And that was something that our local organization partnered with to make sure that our state could be there.
I know my state organization, when we meet in person, we have breakout sessions, so that the elementary librarians go into this breakout session, middle school go into this breakout, and the high school goes into the breakout. And then you have the independents. And the independent librarians go into a breakout session for themselves because of all the circumstances that might be shared, whether you are a private or you're a parochial or you're non-denominational or you're charter, but you do have, I'm sure, some conditions and some circumstances which are unique to being in an independent school rather than being sort of housed in an umbrella sort of district, like probably the majority of the people belonging to your state organization.
The exciting thing about going to a state organization is to learn about things I didn't even know I wanted to learn about. So one of the greatest sessions I went to, we did have a conference this spring in person, and I presented 2 different workshops myself. That's one thing I can do. I can present and say, here are some things that I do. Here are some things that have worked at my school, and here's how it went. Or when I do professional development, either being sort of I'm here so that you have an extra number on your screen, and I'm right there with you because I've been doing this for 20 years, and we see each other, or I'm here to listen and learn something new or gain a new perspective that I haven't considered before.
I'm curious, do you have any recollection of learning about independent school libraries when you were in your master's program for library science?
I did my master's program through the University of Missouri, Columbia, which is based in Columbia, Missouri. And it was a hybrid program. So some of our classes were online, and some of our classes were in person here in St. Louis, taught by professionals in our field. And I really, really valued both of those dynamics. For a children's literature class, I was already working in a library at the time in the children's room. Children's lit was great to do online. I mean, it was so project-based and just really immersive in your own environment, your own experience. But collection development was in person. Absolutely. Cataloging was in person. I know there's some MLS programs that don't require cataloging classes anymore. And I think that's a decision people have to make. Do I do the type of cataloging I learned in my MLS? No, but gosh, I know why it's there. And I know when it needs to be there. So that mix of things is really there were some great in-person classes. There was a class I didn't get the chance to take. I think that the person who had been in charge of it for a while had left the region, and that there was a special libraries class, and it was every week you visited a corporate library, you visited the botanical gardens library, you visited a university library. So even the knowledge that class existed, if you were in the know, you knew that Boeing has a librarian, Ralston Purina, now Nestle Purina, has a librarian. These were kind of just really the law library, just doing some things to know how those jobs are different. So from that, the person who had taught that class and who had left the region, though, she had referred me to do some workshops and collection development professional development for the Catholic Library Association, which is then another whole, there's all of these little micro organizations. And she had been doing some of that throughout the years, just as I think an old friend. And she looked at my job as doing collection development for the public library. She said, I think you'd be really good at this, and would you like to? So if you want to think about the dynamic of, I'm going from a public library with 17 different locations and a budget that I don't ever have to say no to a book. I have to figure out what branch it gets to sit in, or how many branches get that book, or how many we get because it's going to be the next big thing. But when I was at St. Louis Public Library in my last 2 years, that's what I was doing. It was very exciting. And then having to set my brain into a dynamic of speaking to a group of librarians who, some of them have master's degrees in library science and are in that space. And some of them are a parent volunteer who is still a parent volunteer. Some of them are a parent volunteer who now is getting paid, or, just these little tiny pieces. And then working in the element of, and where do you find a budget? And I think that's one of the biggest things we don't necessarily talk about is how much money do you get to buy books? And because a budget is not necessarily what other people think of as a budget, whether you have to pay for your own catalog, whether you have to pay for your databases, whether you have to pay for these as a district or as a consortium, or you're a person who's doing it all on your own and no one even knows that, yes, we do have to have World Book Encyclopedia just because it's something, we have to have something. So those little things, like, it was a chance for me to see, even within the parochial school setting, that there was a wide range of libraries, librarians, library workers, and budgets. So there are little times that I will talk about my budget does not reflect what, like collection development wise, this much turnover in your collection plus loss ratio and all of these different sorts of things. But also I know what it looks like to have zero budget. So it's a big deal.
Well, and you stick around long enough, and you experience a myriad of different challenges, especially for those of us who've had the opportunity to move from different library settings, and you gain a better appreciation of what you had, what you need, and the things that really truly matter in a library program. And I think that perspective, if I can say I've brought some diversity to the recent hiring group in my school, it's that my age means that I bring a great deal of perspective that some of our rookie hires who are my daughter's age don't necessarily have. But I'm curious, I undoubtedly there are listeners right now who are considering working in an independent school, or perhaps this is a possibility that they might pursue in the future, since there is so much mobility right now with the job market being as favorable as it is. Can you tell us, just be candid, what are some challenges that you have encountered in working in an independent school?
Well, I think that from a standpoint of being in an independent school means that I really control my curriculum. I really have a lot of flexibility, and I can roll with the news, with current events, with the supermoon. I mean, everything is open. As long as my overarching research skills, critical literacy skills, those types of things, book composition, early childhood, some of those, as long as I can incorporate those. And I think that is largely true for most elementary school librarians. You get a lot of creativity on the ground. With an independent school, that also means my colleagues, the other teachers at my school, also have a lot of flexibility and creativity, and they have their curricular goals as well, but we could be going in a direction of this class teaches these 3 countries to talk about citizenship and the world around us, and out of nowhere they are changing their countries. So I have a collection, and I think I would imagine that this happens at many schools to some extent, but they change their curriculum. I have all these books on one country. I only need 2 books on this one country. And now they've chosen a country. Then I'm like, not finding anything past 2015. So let's talk about databases, So just working through that type of dynamic that you might have a system, you might have something rolling, and then it changes. Maybe that's appealing. It is appealing to me, I will say. I get through that frustration really quickly and then move into, this is an exciting new opportunity. The job stays fresh. But budget-wise, you don't necessarily, you changed your curriculum, but that doesn't mean that my budget changed to be able to accommodate that in this year. So that, I think, is a challenging dynamic. If you have a district overarching change, I would hope or expect that there would be some sense of, how does this impact other departments in the district?
Oh, I'm sure. And I think this speaks to different personality styles, because there are those of us who really, thrive with an opportunity to take that kind of initiative and be more, sort of responsive to the immediate things that are happening around you. And yet I talk to librarians who are in a district with 67 librarians, and there's more than 35 elementary librarians. And you've got a lot of, I wouldn't say lockstep, but you have a far more structured approach towards the curriculum, because you have 37 people who are all teaching, in this case, elementary, and they're moving with a curriculum that has, it's on a cycle of it's been approved by the board. And then all of a sudden you've got a great deal more regimen to how things are done, because you're in a much larger, district setting, as opposed to your standalone. So you're sort of me, myself, and I, and this is what I'm going to do today. And I think that would probably speak to a lot of people's personalities. I know I'd love it. So, I'm curious, I'm certain there's certain aspects of your job that are considerably less complicated, because you are wholly independent and you don't answer to a department chair and you don't attend department meetings, because you are a standalone school.
Yeah, well, that's a great sort of prerogative, even in terms of, I think of a department as, for me, we have a literacy person for each grade. We have the language arts teacher in each grade, and the math teacher and the social studies teacher, and they meet together, and I sit in often. What I find really, really exciting is, and this kind of goes back to the place where I love going to the social studies curriculum meetings and the science curriculum meetings. Those are my favorite. I mean, just picture elementary school science and then picture books. I mean, when you put those 2 things together, that is where it's at. I mean, nonfiction picture books that are engaging kids in looking at science from different angles. That whole Melissa Stewart 5 kinds of nonfiction, that entire world is to me the most exciting thing in nonfiction literature for children. And so from what's the best use of my time and where do my collaborations tie in really, really well? It's those social studies meetings and the science meetings that I really come alive. I've sat in on some language arts meetings, and it's not without the field of this type of reading instruction versus this type of reading instruction versus handwriting versus all of that minutia is really important. And it's not where my skills dovetail for the school best. So even from that perspective, I do have some ability to sort of, I'm going to say pick and choose. Yeah, you got to go to a department meeting. Basically, that's, and sometimes I say to the Spanish teachers, you know, we've got a lower school, upper school Spanish. I'm like, let the three of us go and meet together and we'll talk about picture books and language and some things that we can do that are maybe less tied to the literacy piece. And so sometimes we make our own. And I think that is another piece of making your own community, you know, just finding those departments and those creative and analytical. I mean, the math teacher in 5th grade is one of my favorite people to work with because she wants to do data literacy. So regular conversations that we have about how kids read graphs and how graph misinterpretation leads to misinformation in the news cycle. And I have a math teacher who is just amazing and looks at the library as we should be working together and not that we're overstepping or stepping on each other's toes in terms of the curriculum. So I am really lucky in that regard. What has been more challenging sort of over the past course of different leadership changes is having to explain your role to each new administrator that comes on board, which is we are not alone in that, I know. I will say that because people come on tours of our school, they'll come around with the admissions director and visit classrooms in the middle of the day while you're teaching, or when you're in your planning period and all of a sudden you have someone there who wants to talk about books. And it's very empowering because you get to give your elevator speech straight to a parent. And often if they have their child with them, it's an opportunity to talk to the child and ask them what they're excited about reading. And that fills me as much as it could be. It is that balance of, I was going to use this time a little bit differently right now, but here's an opportunity to talk about what I do. And then it's not just the admissions director knows then what I do, but that those families have an expectation that when their child comes into this school, that I'm going to fulfill what I said I was going to do. So that piece to some people is really frustrating to be interrupted or disrupted like that. But I think it's a chance to see people eye to eye. There is that sense of you are in a school where someone has to make a decision of where they're going to put their resources and where they want their child to be cared for and learn and grow for the next 10 years, perhaps. So that's an important decision for families to make. But going back to that integrity piece is, what do I stand for? And if I have a chance to tell you when you're on the interview process that children will see themselves represented in my books, in the collection, and they will see others' lives represented as well, I'm being straightforward right out of the gate. And that is usually a refreshing signal to people coming through my library on their tours.
I really do like, and I know a lot of librarians, whether you work in a private school, a public school, I know that in all grade levels, oftentimes when families are coming into the neighborhood, they're coming in to see the school that their child is going to be attending. The school library is almost always going to be on that school tour because we are a place that really showcases. It is a focal point. It is a very showy place where we can, impress the families that are, and prospective families that are coming and looking for for a place to pay tuition for their child to go. I know we're in a district of open district, which means that students from other districts can actually come to us. So we are also in a place where we want to woo students to come to our school because the tax dollars come with them. And so the school library is always going to be that focal point. And if districts are smart, and if your school is smart, they're going to channel some of those important monies to make this space as appealing to as large an audience as possible. You know, Melissa mentioned nonfiction, and I want to make sure if you haven't listened to episode 158 and my conversation with Melissa Stewart, oh my gosh, this was like fangirl moment. I loved this episode because I was able to interview Melissa in the week prior to her receiving this, is it pronounced Siebert Award? I'm now forgetting. It's the Siebert Award. And so I interviewed her before she received the Siebert honor. And then we did a quick, follow up. And I interviewed her after she received the award. And, you know, in my library, she is, especially elementary library, she is so well represented in our nonfiction that she is this amazing advocate for the nonfiction piece of our collection. And I was absolutely delighted to be able to interview her. So if you haven't listened to episode 158, please, friends, make sure that you do that, because you will never look at your nonfiction collection again the same way, because she just absolutely opens your eyes to just how much our nonfiction has in the way of an appeal to many of our readers. So, you know, I want to make sure you've talked so much about the things that you feel passionately about, and you've talked so much about the things that you absolutely love about your school. What advice would you give to listeners who are contemplating taking on a position in an independent school library?
The thing I would sort of caution, or at least have you consider, is where you're at in your career and what sort of risk, I guess, you can afford in terms of where you're at with a retirement plan or a pension. If you're with a public school district that is self-funded and you are in a great pension plan, it is going to take a lot to pull you into a private school setting. I'm very lucky that we're in a competitive pool in terms of there are a number of private schools in the St. Louis region. And I feel like going from public librarian to private school librarian, I feel like my pay package was reflective of my experience as a librarian. I did not have to come in as year zero, the same as my 25-year-old colleagues. I was able to get recognition for that time, and there's a pay scale. So there is some transparency to what someone could expect from a job in a competitive market. And then the flip side of that is I'm in a traditional retirement plan, and yep, I get, I think, 2% match, and they'll let you put in more as you go on. But it is not the same as a state designated pension. I would then also say, I don't know that anything is anymore. One of my experiences for my own children's school district, in that time that I was not working outside the home, I was on the long-term financial planning committee for my child's school district. And that was a very eye-opening in terms of how state money and local school spending is allocated, and how the retirement and health insurance and all of those things that all of us are deeply, deeply invested in right now. So I would say, if it is I previously had a dream job. When I left St. Louis Public Library, I did collection development. Amy, I mean, again, the idea of being able to buy every single book for 16 different locations and having a city budget for book buying was like heaven. And the disappointment on that was I gave up the opportunity to use books with children. My son was at home, or not at home. My son was in childcare, and I was not a young mom being able to share books with my own child, and I was no longer in a public-facing role, being able to make sure that these books got into kids' hands and that things I saw on the reviewing end made it to the library end, where those books are gonna just, oh, these kids are going to love these books. So I lost that. But I mean, that was one dream job. And I feel like this is my second dream job, and not without its frustrations or troubles or exhaustion. I'm sitting in a room right now with my entire library boxed up because, like many times that people have had to do library projects or cleaning projects or painting projects. There's a whole different slew of things. But to be able to both, like you said, I think you said that before, the from the beginning to the end, I'm everything. And that can be stressful, but it can also be really amazing because you're seeing the book, you're seeing how you can use it in a program. And a lot of times I don't have enough time, but I have great teachers. I have amazing teachers who I will walk into the room and say, this book is going to blow your mind. This is, that River program you've been doing. There's a new River book and you have to have it. And I got a copy so you can see. And so that piece of what I get to do it's connections. It's literally, if you do go back and listen to my speech, I talk about the librarian being the thread, like this amazing thread that can touch everything in your school. But that is when I am maybe at my most happy, is when I can connect a child to a book. I can connect a teacher to a book. I can connect a teacher and a child together over a similar interest. I've known these kids every year. I think you mentioned that people come through on a tour. That's one of the things I always say. I will know your child for 10 years of their schooling. I've only been here. This is my 7th year, but that idea of they don't have to relearn who I am. They come in day one, and the library is a comfortable place. The librarian is a familiar person who already knows a little bit about them, and they've changed over the summer, but so has she. And how do we relearn every year? But how do you build in that idea of there is a great strength in, I knew you when you were in kindergarten, and I know you when you're in 6th grade, and you are an amazing person. And I am still here for you, and whatever that looks like for the library experience. But it's like a rock. It's like this foundation that they get to keep.
Aw, Melissa Pillot, you are an absolute delight. I am so inspired just listening to you right now. I know other people like to follow you on social media. Would you let us know where we can find you?
Yes, I do Twitter, and I do Forsyth_library, and I do Instagram at Forsyth_library. And I have dropped my personal Twitter for now, just from a mental health space. I would say that if you are in the zone to be able to find really amazing things there, I do. I found Amy there. I found Casey there. I found so many amazing educational librarian author pieces there. And I kind of had to switch off of my personal world and sort of look at, like, how can I compartmentalize this time so that I am using it as my librarian time. So that is how I like to run those. So those have not had activity this summer, but they will become reactivated with the school year. I really do enjoy doing Instagram for just what books I read, sometimes work that the kids have done, but it is, and from Twitter, I am mostly a learner. I know people have been in that space of, I'm a lurker on Twitter. I follow, but I don't comment. I'm like, good. Learn what you can. It is okay to be someone who reads and gains perspective by following voices that they might not have in their local community, or they might not yet know in their local community. And so that is a space I get a lot of learning from. And then Instagram is just a fun way to just highlight what library does and can do. So.
Well, and friends, I'll tell you what, when this episode airs, Melissa's going to be back in school. So listen, I appreciate all of the time that you've given us today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your summer and have a terrific school year, Melissa.
Thank you so much for having me, Amy. I appreciate it.
I am so grateful to Melissa for coming on the show today and sharing with us what it is like to be an independent school librarian. If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider sharing a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. One last friendly reminder, I encourage you to take advantage of Capstone's generous $20 discount off an order of $100 or more for using the code UNITED. The topic of our next episode will be Bilingual Librarian and my conversation with Karina Quilanton, Jennifer Gonzalez, and Miranda Quintero. I hope you will tune in.